Gute Woche. The Rebbe told us to begin the Farbrengen this afternoon that today we have read Parshas Behaaloscha. And as it's brought in Shulchan Aruch, Behaaloscha is a Chazarah which is usually read in the weeks right after Matan Torah. We know that there are two ways of Kriyas HaTorah. There is one system that the Torah is divided. The Rambam writes about that the Torah is finished over every 3 years. A little more than 3 years. But the system which we are in is that there are 53 weeks in the year, and there are 53 Sedras, Gan, Parshiyos, 53 Parshiyos, and every week has its Sedra. And as it's brought in Svarim, that Parshas Behaaloscha is a Sedra which is usually read in the close-by weeks right after Matan Torah. And the contents of Parshas Behaaloscha is, it tells us about Aaron kindling the menorah, Behaaloscha es haneros. And when we're looking at it in Ruchnias, it means that every Yid, every Neshama, there's a Neir Hashem Nishmas Adam. Everyone's Neshama is compared to a Neir. And this Neir has to be kindled. Because actually every Jew is part of this major menorah. There is the menorah which was made in the Mishkan. And as we read in the Torah that the menorah had seven wicks. And as the Alter Rebbe explains in this week's Lakota Torah, that when we're talking about Yidden, in the Avodah of Yidden, there are also 7 levels of Avodah. Everything in Avodas Hashem is based on love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'ahavtos Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha. So there's the famous Zohar that the Zohar says, Leis pulchana kepulchana derichimusa. There's no other service that can be compared to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu as the service of love. Rechimusa means rechimu, ahava. Ava to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. However, in this foundation of Ava, there are various levels, just like we find in Midas, that there's the Midas HaChesed, and then we know that the Midas HaChesed is divided into 7. There's Chesed Shebechesed, Gvura Shebechesed, and so forth, as we just said recently in Sfiras HaImah. The same when we're talking in Avodas Hashem, based on the foundation of Avas Hashem, there are 7 levels, 7 divisions in Avodas Hashem. And when we're talking about Behaaloscha es haneros, it doesn't only refer to the simple sense of the mitzvah of kindling the menorah in the Mishkan, but it also refers to the Neir Hashem Nishmas Adam that is within every Yid, that this has to be kindled and has to be put into effect, that it should light and shine. And here we come to a Rashi in Parshas Behaaloscha, because as it is known that Rashi contains not only Pshutei Shel Mikra, but Rashi contains Inyanim Mufloim, in wonderful Inyanim in Yeno Shel Torah, and the wine of Torah, and in Avodas Hashem. So Rashi brings out that how does the menorah have to be lit? It has to be lit in a format of Shetehei Shal Heves Oila Me'eleho, that once Aaron kindled the menorah, then the flame had to go on by itself. The same thing when we're talking in Ruchnis. Every Yid has taka the Neir Hashem Nishmas Adam, and the Neshama of a Yid gets its strength and its assistance from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. However, the Rebishter wants that a Yid should develop his licht, his Neir Hashem Nishmas Adam, which each and every Neshama is, it should develop by itself. In other words, what's the pshat by itself? By the Avodah of a Yid. In other words, a Yid should invest his Avodah and his effort, and it should be through his effort that the Shalheves, that the flame is developing and going up. How is all this happening? It is happening by itself. What's the pshat? It's happening by itself. It's happening through the effort of the Yid. We know that we are getting help from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it is take help. It is take isiyua, which means assistance, which we're getting from Hashem. However, the development of the kindling of the Neir, this has to be done through the Avodah of a Yid. In other words, a Yid has to put in his Avodah, his Avodas Hashem, so that he develops his own Neir Hashem Nishmas Adam, that it really begins to light and shine and to illuminate. Here the Rebbe brings, there's an expression in Chazal, Gemara, Misayeya ein boi mamish. That when one helps, and he really doesn't do the whole thing, he just helps, that's the simple meaning of it. It is really not considered that he has done it. The Rebbe is applying a taich, misayeya ein boi mamish. What means mamish? The Rebbe always keeps on stressing, mamish is an expression which is used on something tangible, something which we can grab hold of, something which we can really do it. The help which we are getting from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the siyuah, this is not something tangible. In other words, this is not the mamish, the mamoshes of the Avodas Hashem. True, there is help. However, when we are talking in the level of mamoshes, in other words, something which we can feel, which we can touch, something which can be felt in Avodas Hashem, this is something which a Yid has to develop himself and reach to it on his own. On his own, Shetei shall heves olam eila. And this is so Benegeya himself, and the same thing Benegeya others. Because the kindling of the Menorah, which is the Neir Hashem Nishmas Adam of every Yid, this is something which a person does not have to keep only to himself. And as we say right away at the beginning of davening, Hareini mikabel alai mitzvahs hasei shel v'ahavta l'reyacha kamoicha. So that means as an act of Avos Yisrael, we have to see to it that our friend should also reach to the same level, also to reach to this level that he is able to develop the own menorah that is within him, the own neir, the neir Hashem Nishmas Adam that is within every Yid, that he can develop it, that the flame that it's supposed to go on in the neir, the shalheves should be oila me'ileh, should be developing on its own, should be developing as a result of his own efforts and his own avodah into it. And this is something which the Rebbe has given this power really to each and every Jew. Because the truth is that each and every Jew wants to serve the Rebbe, and ultimately every Yid will be serving the Rebbe. As the Rambam writes, that if Ticha Torah, the Torah has pledged us. And whom does Torah pledge to? Torah pledges to Yid. Promises to Yid that when it come the end of the time of Golus, each and every Yid will do tshuva, and each and every Yid will return to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and get close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Takib, one may say, how can we say that now we are at the end of Golus, and now Mashiach will come? As the expression goes in Gemara, Achsher Dore Bitmiyeh, an expression of one that is then our generation greater than previous generations. The previous generations who were so great, they were not able to accomplish Geula. How is it that our generation will be able to accomplish Geula? Says the Rebbe, all the toiv, all the good that has been done throughout the years, all the toiv remains eternal. However, all the non-good which has been done throughout the years, all of that falls away. Ra, no good. The opposite of toiv, evil, does not have a basis of existence. So therefore, throughout all the years, as we are going further and further, there is more toiv, there's more good that has been developed. And everything in toiv is eternal and remains and is here forever, and each and every additional step of toiv adds on to it. However, the no good, the evil, this is something which is not in existence. It falls away. That does not accumulate. So therefore, dafke, because we are in these generations, in generations where all the good of the previous generations, and all of this toiv has already accumulated, this makes us that we should be worthwhile, that Geula should come in this generation, and especially as kolu kol hakitzer, as the Gemara uses the expression, all the set times for Geula have already passed, and it's definitely the furthest point already that the Rebbe should take us all out of Golus, and that Mashiach should come. And here the Rebbe refers to an inyan which we find in Gemara regarding the Bayis Sheni. Regarding the second Beis HaMikdash, we find that it was called the Bayis of Hurdes. There was a king Hurdes, and he remodeled and made a beautiful Beis HaMikdash, the second Beis HaMikdash. As the Gemara at the beginning of Bava Basra tells us at length. And the second Beis HaMikdash was called Binyan Shel Hurdes. And we find many details in Gemara that the Gemara says that why was it? Gemara uses the expression that anybody that hasn't seen Binyan Shel Hurdes, the structure of Hurdes, really never saw something nice. So we see that all of we see constantly in Chazal that it is called the house of Hudas. So the question arises, says the Rebbe, regarding Hudas, Bechlal, there's a lot of question on his yichus, where he stemmed from. Some claim he was an eved, he was a servant, slave. And why call it with the name of Hudas? Why can't the second Beis HaMikdash be credited to Ezra and Nehemiah? Ezra and Nehemiah, they were the ones that brought the Yidden out of Golas Bavel, and brought the Yidden back to Eretz Yisrael. So the second Beis HaMikdash came as a result of Ezra and Nehemiah. So we see, no, it's not called the house of Ezra and Nehemiah, it's called the house of Hudas. And this requires an explanation why. The Rebbe brings out, what is the major difference between the first Beis HaMikdash and the second Beis HaMikdash? First Beis HaMikdash is Avodas HaTzadikim. Second Beis HaMikdash is Avodas HaTshuva. To the extent that why did Yidden get the second Beis HaMikdash? Because they did Tshuva in Golas Bavel. So that is why Tshuva not only means to do Tshuva, but Tshuva means return. So that is why they were physically returned to Eretz Yisrael. They were brought back to Eretz Yisrael. They were given the second Beis HaMikdash. Says the Rebbe, so that is why Dafke, by referring to the Beis HaMikdash as the house of Hudas, here we find stress on the greatness of Tshuva. As the Gemara tells us, that Hudas committed terrible crimes, he killed all of the Chachamim in his generation. Yes. And then he turned to Bava ben Buta, who was the only Talmid Chacham who he let alive, and he asked him what is the proper Tshuva that he can do. And Bava ben Buta told him that he should go ahead and renovate the Beis HaMikdash. So what do we see that Hudas is outstanding for? For the greatness of Avodas HaTshuva. This is what second Beis, the holy need of the second Beis HaMikdash was, emphasizing the greatness of Tshuva. And now when we will have the third Beis HaMikdash, the third Beis HaMikdash will comprise within it all the advantages, all the pluses of the first Beis HaMikdash, Avodas HaTzadikim, as well as the Avodah of the second Beis HaMikdash, which emphasized Avodas HaTshuva. So we know that Mother says if somebody gives Kiddushin, Almanas, that he's doing Tshuva, and everything wrong that he did, so the Gemara uses the expression, Areza Tzadik Gomel. He's a whole complete tzaddik. Says the Rebbe, what does it mean? He's a tzaddik gomel. Not only does he have the advantage of tzaddik within him, he has also the advantage of a Baal Tshuva. That's the pshat tzaddik gomel. He's at a very high level that he contains side avodah of tzaddikim and side avodah of Baal Tshuva. And actually, this is brought out regarding La'asid Lovik. The expression that Mashiach osel asava tzaddikaya b'tiyufta, that Mashiach will come and he will add on that tzaddikim will also gain the advantage of Avodas HaTshuva. So when we will have the third Beis HaMikdash, which we are hoping for, which will come immediately, in this third Beis HaMikdash we will have all the advantages, side of the first Beis HaMikdash, as well as the advantages of the second Beis HaMikdash. The Rebbe continued that yesterday was 15 days in the month. And as the Zohar uses the expression, Kaima Sihara Ba'ashli Musa. The moon stood in its completeness. And today is the day following Kaima Sihara Ba'ashli Musa. As we know the expression, Misha Torach Be'erev Shabbos, the one who prepares on Erev Shabbos, Yoichal B'Shabbos, he has what to eat on Shabbos. So now that we are on the day which follows Tes Vav Siv, in other words, we reached the level of shleimus, of whole and complete, yesterday. And today, yesterday was the day that we prepared for this day, for today, for the day of Shabbos. So we can understand that this is something that has given us a tremendous amount of shleimus, whole and complete, until we will reach the ultimate union of shleimus, a wholeness and completeness, which that will be through the coming of Mashiach. That is when everything will be really at the fullest sense and degree, whole and complete. Especially that we are coming now from Kabbalah Satorah. And when we come from Kabbalah Satorah, it is as if we have received the Torah again. Not only as if, but we taka received the Torah again. And especially this year, Tavshin Nun, which is the year of special significance, Tehei Shnas Nisim. And Bechlal, we are in a period that we are already in the 6,000th of B'riyas Ha'olam. And there's a famous Orach Chaim HaKodesh, what Orach Chaim brings out, it's in Parshas Sav, on the pasuk, Eish Tamid Tukad Ala Mizbeach Lo Yisichbe. And there the Orach Chaim, in the beginning of Parshas Sav, brings out how when we are in the 6,000 of creation, we are already in the Friday of creation. We are preparing before Shabbos. And being that we are already in the latter part of 6,000, of the 6,000 years, in other words, it's already 5,750 years, which we are up to now, that means we are already at a time of Friday late afternoon. And there he brings out a whole arichas based on this, which already means that we are close to Geula. So the Rebbe, the most prints of Chumashim, the Orach Chaim HaKodesh, the commentary of the Orach Chaim, is printed just together with Rashi. Just like Rashi, we know is Pshuta Shel Mikra. Rashi is telling us the simple meaning of the pasuk, which means that something which has a shaykhs to each and every yid. The same thing when we're talking of all the Chumashim have the commentary of the Orach Chaim, that means that this inyan which the Orach Chaim brings out also relates to each and every yid. The commentary of the Arizal on the Chumash is not something which is printed in all the editions of the Chumash. Rabbi says in recent years there was an edition of Chumash, which also has the commentary of the Arizal, and blessed be those that did it. But in the general editions of Chumashim we do not find it. Why? Because this is not something that relates to Pshuta Shel Mikra. It's not something that has a shaykhs to everybody. But Orach Chaim, being that it's printed in all the editions together with Rashi, that means that the inyanim that are brought out in Orach Chaim also relate to each and every yid. In the 5,000 of creation, says the Rebbe, that was completely Golus. The 4,000 of creation was not completely Golus. It was part still before Golus, and part of it wasn't Golus. However, the 6,000 of creation, which we are in now, will also not be completely Golus. That will also be converted immediately to Geula. And that is why it's brought out in Svarim that the thousands of Briyas HaOlam relate to the Sfiras. The 5,000 relates to the fifth of Sfiras. What is the fifth of Sfiras? The fifth of Sfiras is Sfiras HaHoid. Sfiras HaHoid. If we were to take the word Hoid, it has this. We can take the letters that put together the word Hoid, which is Hey Vav Daled, and they'll put together the word Davoy. Daled Vav Hey. What does Davoy mean? Davoy is an expression of crying. It's an expression of Golus. And this corresponds because the 5,000 of Briyas HaOlam was Kulei Golus. Kolei Vav Davoy, there's a pasuk, which means an Indian of heartbroken, crying. This relates to Golus. However, the 1,000 which we are in now, this will be converted to the extent that we will be the last generation of Golus and we will be the first generation of Giyul. As we spoke earlier, that this is the Seder of Behaaloscha. And in Parshas Behaaloscha we read about the kindling of the menorah. And as we interpreted it, that the spiritual sense, it means the Neir Hashem Nishmas Adam that is within every Jew. The same, based on this, the Rebbe continues that there is a klal in Gemara, Hadlokok Sheira Bizar, that to light the menorah, even a zar, a stranger, not only a Kohen Gadol, but any Kohen, not only a Kohen, but even a Levi, or any Yisrael, or not only Yisrael, even a Geir, as long as he was converted to Halacha, anybody can light the menorah. So the question arises: the menorah stood in the Beis Hamikdash, in the Beis Hamikdash, in an area which only Kohenim are permitted to enter. So how can we say that anyone can light the menorah? So one of the answers that's given on it is that the menorah taka were it in its place, taka a zar, a stranger, is not allowed to enter there. However, it is permitted to take the menorah out of its place and bring it into an area in the Beis Hamikdash where any Yisrael, where everyone is allowed to enter, and he will light it there, and then it will be returned to its place. By Neiras Chanukah, it is not so. Because Neiras Chanukah, there is a klal, hadloka isa mitzvah, the lighting of it is doing the mitzvah, so we have to light it in its proper place. We cannot light the Chanukah licht in one place and later transfer it to its proper place. However, the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash is something that Allah tells us we were able to transfer the menorah anywhere to an area where anyone is permitted to enter and light it there and then put it back to its place. What does this show us in Avodah? In Avodah it shows us that to the inyan of the menorah, which as we just brought out, it reflects the neshama of each and every yid, to kindle the menorah, and to kindle it in a way, as we discussed earlier, shall heves oila me'eleh, that ultimately the flame will develop on its own. What do we mean by on its own? Through the avodah of each and every yid. This is something which has a shaykhs to each and every Jew. No Jew can say that this does not mean him. Just like we find that every Jew is kosher to kindle the menorah, the same when we're talking in Ruchnias. This lesson which the menorah gives us on the importance of kindling the neshama that is within each and every yid, which is compared to a neir Hashem nishmasadam, and the way it should be lit, as we just mentioned, and the way of shalheves oila me'eleh. This is something which has a shaykhs to each and every Jew. Has a shaykhs to each and every one of us, and we have to reach out and make sure that this message reaches each and every yid. As we discussed last week, what is mentioned in the first mission of Pirkei Avos, v'hamidu talmidim harbe, that everybody has this responsibility upon him to put up many students. Now, how many students? One has already taught today. When it comes tomorrow and he has an opportunity to reach more students, how many students and how many shiurim of Torah may have been able to give until today? He may have given yesterday and the day before and a week before and so forth. However, if today he can reach out to more students, he has not fulfilled the Midu Talmidim Harbe yet. Because Mishnah tells us, put up many Talmidim. And this number of many, if there are still such Yidden that he has not reached out to, and today he can reach out to them. Though yesterday he taught Torah to so many Yidden, and the day before taught Torah to so many Yidden. If he could still reach out today to reach out to more Yidden, this is what the Mishnah tells us, v'hamidu talmidim harbe. To reach out to as many Yidden as possible. Many Yidden. This also coincides to what the Rebbe spoke about in last week's Farbrengen, on the importance of instituting new shiurim and Torah. New shiurim and Torah in general, and how much more desirable it would be that if the shiurim could be shiurim barabim with the participation of at least 10 people. And this is something which relates side to men, side to women, and side to children. And especially as we see the nature in children, that when a child learns something new, hears of something new, he immediately runs around and tells his friends about it, that he heard something new and he just learned something new. The Rebbe emphasized very strongly, urging all of us to get involved in starting new shiurim and Torah. The Rebbe says those that have done it already have seen that it is not as hard as it seems. And it's something which can be achieved, and we can reach out to involve more and more Yidden to add on, to be meisef in shiurim and learning Torah. And as mentioned, most advisable and most worthy if this can be with the participation of at least 10 people, but if it cannot be with participation of 10, at least to be meisef shiurim and Torah. And each and every additional shiur and Torah is definitely worthwhile and appreciated. And this is also something which relates to a Mishnah in today's Pirkei Avos. Today we said to Mincha the second Perek, which in the second Perek there is a Mishnah, a quotation of Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Tarfon Omer, Hayoim Kotzar, the day is short, V'amalocha meruba, the work is much. The workers are lazy. And as he goes on saying, the reward is great. And the master is pressing. So Rebbe, what kind of messages Rabbi Tarfon giving us? Naturally, when we're talking about the Balabayis, who we mean the Balabayis, we mean HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what is he telling us? That HaKadosh Baruch Hu is pressing us. Kadosh Baruch Hu is known that He's a Keil Rachum V'Chanun. He's a God of kindness and good. And here we say, the message Reb Tarfon is giving us that the Master is pressing. And furthermore, we have to understand, Bechlal, what is the name of Tarfon? Says the Rebbe, the name Tarfon is not a Hebrew name. And we cannot say that he had other names, but it definitely would have been mentioned. And we don't find anywhere in Chazal that it should be mentioned that Reb Tarfon had another name. For example, regarding Reb Meir, we know his name was Reb Meir, and it's also mentioned that he had another name which was not in the Hebrew language, and that was Reb Nahiroi. And that's why at times he is called Taki Reb Nahiroi. However, regarding Reb Tarfon, we do not find that he should have another name, and a name usually brings out what the person is. So how come that when we're talking about a person, the stature of Reb Tarfon, that his name should be based Tarfon on a shame Laz? Laz abbreviates Loshen Amzo, and not on a Hebrew name. Rabbi brings a halacha that if somebody has several names, the halacha is negei writing a document or writing a get. If somebody has several names in other languages and one Hebrew name, then we will not, it's hard to say, we cannot say actually that his Hebrew name will be forgotten because it's only one name. If he has several names, amongst several names, one name could be forgotten. So, but if there is one Hebrew name, the one Hebrew name will not be forgotten. So, how is it taka that a person, the caliber of Reb Tarfon, should have a name, and a name that should be related as a name in a name of Laz, a name in a strange language, not in the name of not a Shem in Lashon HaKodesh? And the answer for this we find in the message which Reb Tarfon is giving us. Moment. Rabbi also mentioned we find the importance of a name. We find that in the 6th Perek. In the 6th Perek, the Mishnah tells us there, if somebody says something over on behalf of somebody else, it brings redemption to the world. Like we find that Esther gave over the message b'shem Mordechai. So we see how Chazal stressed the importance of using proper names, Esther, Mordechai, or the famous Chazal, which Chazal tell us that one of the merits which the Yidden was zeicha to go out of Mitzrayim was the fact shinu es shmam, they did not change their names. Reuven, Shimon, Nachse, Reuven, Shimon, Salki. With the names of Reuven and Shimon they entered Mitzrayim, and with the same names of Reuven and Shimon they came out of Mitzrayim. So again we see all of this emphasizes the greatness of Shem Kodesh. So here, when we're talking about a Tana and the stature of Reb Tarfon, he had a name Tarfon, which was a name of Laz. But as mentioned, the Rebbe says the answer for this we find in the contents of his message, which Reb Tarfon is telling us. What does he tell us? The day is short. V'hamelacha meruba. There's a lot of work. What does he mean there's a lot of work? All types of work. There is the Avodah of Torah. There's the Avodah of mitzvahs. Then there's the Avodah in Inyane Reshus, in the matters which we can choose and desire what to do in this world, which is up to our choice. And what does Reb Tarfon say? Hamlocha meruba. A Yid has to know that he has a tremendous amount of work. What's the pshat, a tremendous amount of work? That a Yid's responsibility is to reach out to Gashmias, to reach out into the world, and to see that in Yonim, that of Gashmi Yisraelim should become Nishapech, should become turned over to be Kedusha. In other words, what is Reb Tarfon's message? His message is similar to his shame. His shame is a shame Laz, not a shame of Kedusha. And what is he telling us? To reach out into the world, to reach out into Gashmias, Melocha Meruba. There's a tremendous amount of work. What does he mean by tremendous amount of work? In this Gashmiistic world, we have a tremendous amount of work to be Mahapech, to turn over Gashmias to Kedusha. That Gashmi should become Kodesh. Now, who can say such a message? Somebody who is with a name of Laz. Therefore, he realizes what's going on in Laz. He realizes what's going on in the outside world. And he is the one that's telling us that it is our responsibility. It's a short day. There's a tremendous amount of work. And there's a lot of reward. We mentioned here, we mentioned earlier in Farbrengen, that Bechlal, there's amongst Gedolei Yisrael, there are various opinions when will be the time of reward which we will get for doing mitzvahs. Because the Rambam writes that the Gashmistic reward, which the Torah says, V'nasati gishmeichem beitam, which the Torah pledges a reward for observing mitzvahs, the Rambam says this is not a real and true reward. Why? This is only that the Rebishter will put us into a comfortable position so that we should be able to be Mekayim Torah mitzvahs. Naturally, when it is comfortable for us, when we are comfortable in Gashmis, it's much easier to fulfill all of Torah mitzvahs. But the real schar, so there are various opinions. Some claim that it will be in Gan Eden, and some claim that it will be in Tchias HaMeisim. Chassidus, however, accepts the opinion and paskins that it will be in Tchias HaMeisim. Why? Because in Gan Eden it's only in a Neshama, there's no guf there. The reward for Torah mitzvahs, which Torah mitzvahs we fulfill through Gashmias, has to be also Neshama beguf in a Gashmiastic world. And when will that be? That will be at the time of Tchias HaMeisim. Let's get back to our Inyan. So therefore, Reb Tarfon, having a name of Laz, Loshen Hamza, and therefore realizing how much a Yid has to reach out into the world and be mehapech, convert whatever is in the world and bring it to Kedusha, that it should become totally Kodesh. He is the one that's giving us this message of HaMelacha Meruba. And what does he mean? Balabai is doichek, our master is pressing. So this can be understood with what we finish off each and every chapter in Pirkei Avos. We say Reb Chananya ben Akasha immer, Rotza HaKadosh Baruch Hu lezakos es Yisrael. The Rebishter wants to bring schus to Yidden, bring merit to Yidden, lefikach hirba lehem Torah mitzvahs. That is why He's given us an abundance of Torah mitzvahs. So the fact that we have melacha meruba, we have a lot of things to do, that is because the Rebishter wants to bring schus to Yidden. The Rebishter wants to purify Yidden, that Yidden should be able to reach to a much higher level. That is why He's giving us a tremendous amount of work, v'hamelacha meruba, hirba lehem Torah mitzvahs, so that we should be able to fulfill all of that. And this will have an effect on Yidden, that Yidden will be able to reach out into the world, and all worldly matters will be able to be converted to Kedusha. The Rebbe concluded also, what does it mean? Balabai is doichek, the master is pressing. It is pressing for the master. When and where is it pressing for the master? Here in Golus. Now that we are in Golus, not only it is inconvenient for Yidden, but it is inconvenient for the master. And there's no reason why the Rebishter should make it so for Yidden, that the Rebishter should pressure Yidden. The Rebishter is a matern Yidden, as the Rebbe uses the expression. Just like we know there's an expression in Chazal that the Rebishter does not make any nace, any miracle, without any reason. The same way the Rebishter does not matter Yidden, does not make it hard for Yidden unless there's a reason for it. And it's already reached a point where it is inconvenient for Yidden. It's inconvenient for the Rebishter, because the Rebishter is together with Yidden and Golus. It's inconvenient for everybody that it's involved. So there's only one alternative, that the Rebishter should take us all out of Golus, and problems we already had enough in recent generations. Tzoros will not repeat itself, because we had plenty of them already. So all that is left for the Rebishter to do is the Rebishter should take himself out of Golus, and by taking himself out of Golus, the Rebishter has to take Yidden out of Golus. And all of this has to be done immediately. The Rebbe says this can be done even in this Shabbos, before the Shabbos is over, that the Rebishter could get us all out of Golus.